Directed and co-written by Rustam Mozafir. We are talking 2018's The Last Warrior, also known as The Last Scythian, also known as The Scythian, also known as Rage, also known as Scif, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce the Russian name of this. So, yes, this is a very light fantasy, and it's more like historical fiction, but I will put it as a fantasy movie because we have like sort of powers of the gods, a little bit of supernatural kind of going on, a little bit of magic potion that kind of gives you super strength. So it is a fantasy movie, I would suggest, but there is not dragons or fantasy elements like orcs and things like that. It's kind of set on Earth in the past, but with some kind of fantastical elements. So this is a Russian movie. I think you can get dubbed and subbed versions. I watched the subtitled version, and the story is as follows. So it focuses on this guy who is like the main sort of like go-to guy for this kind of lord of this area. So we have this warlord, I suppose, who is ruling this kind of particular area, and they are, I think, Christians. And he's got this guy who is his number one, and his wife's just given birth, and there seems to be a little bit of a conspiracy going on to try and kill the warlord, this kind of king-type character. And these kind of band of mercenaries kidnap our main guy's newly born son and wife. And he is told to kill his lord in exchange for his the life of his son and wife. So he goes to see his lord and kind of tells him this, and that he's meant to kill him with this poison that it's going to take 7 days to take an effect. So they basically, the lord pretends he's taken the poison and it kind of feigns the illness, giving our main character a kind of a 7-day window to try and get his wife back. But at the same time, this lord is kind of saying, like, oh, this guy's trying to kill me, you know, sending his kind of like men after him and things like that. But obviously he's sort of knowing that he didn't really do it. At the same time, our main hero guy, Lutobor or something his name is, actually ends up getting this other guy to help him, who is actually one of the mercenaries that was captured, but gets him to help him for reasons. So the pair of them trek across the country, fighting various battles, and then obviously coming to the conclusion. And that's kind of where I'll start with the old synopsis. So what's this movie like? Now, the best way I would try and pitch it to you, if you've seen other films and stuff, it reminds me in some respects of the 80s Italian sword and sorcery movie Hearts and Armour, which was again about sort of different factions warring, but and was relatively light on the fantasy and more about sort of Dark Ages, medieval sort of style action. It's kind of like this one, but maybe not a lot of people have seen that film. So I will say to you, if you watch the TV show Vikings, it has a very similar aesthetic to that, with different tribes and that kind of the sort of like the sort of Celtic type style look and things. But also it has elements of Mad Max Beyond the Thunderdome. In fact, we even get a scene with a style of Thunderdome and even a kind of Master Blaster type character. So it's obviously its inspirations have come from different areas. So let's talk about it. What works in this movie's favour? Now, it is quite a lavish production, I have to say. There's not huge battles with masses of armies and stuff, but it's got a great production value. It really looks like there was a reasonable budget put behind this. The look of the movie, I think, is scrumptious. And it has some definite stylistic choices involved. That's a double-edged sword. I'm going to come back onto that. But there is definitely a stylistic choice by our director to have some quite energetic and kinetic style action sequences. There's absolutely loads of kind of fight scenes in this, and they are very, very like high energy, very kinetic action sequences. Great cinematography and choreography in regards to the kind of the fight scenes. It's very brutal, but I think the movie does portray a sense of honour from our characters. I think the acting was fine. Obviously, it's always a little harder to kind of judge foreign language movies because I've not seen the emotional cadences and things like this, but you know, I have no issues with it. There was nothing here that stood out to me as particularly kind of weak, I have to say. That was all pretty good. I really enjoyed our interaction between our two leads. These two guys, one of which Lutobor, our main sort of character, and his kind of somewhat unwilling sidekick, Martin, who is actually one of the kind of the band of mercenaries that kidnapped his wife and child, but agrees to help him. And they have this kind of like this bond that sort of grows through the movie. And there's kind of reasons why this guy is helping him. I won't say what it is. I don't want to spoil too much about the movie, but you know, they have a decent sort of bond, and I kind of quite like that. I would have liked it to have been a bit explored a little bit more, particularly towards the end, but nonetheless, I thought it was a kind of a good, almost like buddy style relationship with this kind of like growing sort of trust and respect between these sort of two characters. It's pretty violent, but I do think it has this, you know, some sort of like kind of meaning to it to a degree. The story's quite slight, but there are some elements of the story that I think are quite strong about, you know, who do you belong to, what you are sort of believing in, and the oaths that you take and your word. A lot of this movie is based on one man's word to another, if this makes sense. The sense of honour. A lot of this, the kind of in the story, a lot of the strength and the kind of like the problems are caused by people breaking oaths, taking oaths, giving their word, and things like that, and you know, and that sort of thing. There's a real sense of sort of honour and taking one's word at face value and stuff, and how people might manipulate that to sometimes quite tragic effect. There is a scene in the movie where I feel it really does feel pretty tragic and quite sad in some ways. So the movie does have some good emotional beats within the film. What doesn't work, so I do feel the story is a little slight. I mean, I think the movie ends and starts with a good kind of like sort of elements, some story elements. So we have a strong setup, and I think the end of the movie actually kind of lands on a pretty sort of heart-wrenching finale. And the movie in between that, which is the bulk of the running time, is not a bad movie. And it's full of fight scenes and stuff, but it really is, it feels like just going from one fight scene to another, to another, to another. So that's kind of the bulk of the film, is a series of fight scenes. So the story, I think, had some elements which I think, do you know what, it's a good setup, and I think it ended pretty well, but the bulk of the running time is less about narrative, more about spectacle. And the spectacle is great. You know, that is... that will be true to say. I think, you know, you'll be thrilled with the kind of the action sequence. It's very well put together. But sometimes you're wanting a little bit more character development, I would say. As I say, particularly between our kind of two leads, I felt like it really only sort of scratched the surface between a potential interesting kind of like dichotomy between these sort of two characters. The other thing I think may be a matter of taste, and I think the kind of like energetic camera movements, particularly in the action sequences, these stylistic choices, I think are technically very well done, but I don't know if they suit a movie in the Dark Ages. It seems very modern. So we have like these kind of almost like Matrix-like kind of sweeping camera movements, Sometimes we get kind of quick edits. Sometimes we have this sort of like the camera that sort of long takes and is kind of following things around. And it, you know, on a technical level, I think it looks pretty dynamic. But I do feel it's at odds with the kind of the movie that it's portraying, because it feels modern, but we're having a film set in like the Dark Ages. So I do think it sometimes feels a little at odds, and had the movies kind of like the action scenes maybe been filmed a little more traditionally, it might not have been quite as dynamic, but I think it would have kind of suited maybe the film a little more and made it feel more of its time. Whilst you're so like watching the camera kind of whiz round and things like that, you're thinking, oh, it's very dynamic camera work and stuff, and it is. But I feel, you know, it makes the movie feel very modern in regards to its kind of filming techniques. Again, that might be more of a an issue of taste for me. I think some people might really like this style of filming. But I think it's, although very impressive, I do think it ends up taking a little bit of kind of the feeling of this Dark Ages away a little bit. Overall, though, I think this is a strong film. If you like kind of like the medieval fantasy, Dark Ages, Viking kind of style of action. You'll get plenty of it here. A little light on story, but there is when it gets some good story elements going, I think it actually handles them pretty well. I just wish it had a little bit more sort of character work in the kind of like the middle section of this movie. But I'll give it a 7 out of 10. I think it's a strong film overall, and I would recommend it. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.